T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. We have main engine start. 4, 3, 2, 1, and liftoff. Liftoff of the 25th Space Shuttle mission, and it has cleared the tower.
Roger, roll, Challenger.
It looked like a perfect launch, but 73 seconds into the flight, the Challenger space shuttle was to suffer a devastating explosion, killing all 7 astronauts.
Flight GC, we've had
flight controllers here looking very carefully at the situation. Obviously a major malfunction.
Flight Fido, go ahead. RSO reports vehicle exploded. Copy.
If I were to go through the list of the astronauts that are on board, I probably would crack my voice and tears would form again. And yeah, I do get very emotional because of the fact that human lives were lost needlessly. Because I never considered it an accident, and I will never consider it an accident. It was predetermined what would happen, and people just did not listen.
No one regrets more than I the Challenger accident. It was my hardware that I was responsible for that caused that failure. But given the data I had at the time that we flew the Challenger, as we had the previous vehicles, there was no other engineering decision that could be made based on the data that was available to us.
The shuttle was sold to the American public on economy and reliability. It was supposed to fly 24 missions a year, but the reality was often very different. The previous mission to Challenger, known as STS-51C, had been delayed a record 7 times. Challenger itself had slipped back 4 times, jeopardizing the key reason for the flight, the much-publicized presidential Teacher in Space program. If the shuttle didn't lift off within 2 days, Krista McAuliffe, the teacher who'd been chosen from 11,000 hopeful applicants, would have to give her lessons from space on a weekend to empty classrooms.
This is the launch director. We are a no-go.
Good morning,
Standing now for today.
Looks like we missed the window for the day, gentlemen. We'll advise you back tomorrow.
We're bringing the crew out now.
Okay, copy that.
I think we want to know particularly if there's anything related to the predicted low temperatures that might cause concerns. If you call up your people, we'll meet in conference in 10.
NASA engineers now recalled that a previous flight at low temperature had led to problems with the solid rocket boosters, or SRBs, which lift the shuttle into space. They got onto the contractor over 2,000 miles away.
From launch director that we are going to scrub for today.
Let's hold our breath for another day.
That the people will be coming out to the pad to...
We got temperature predictions for tomorrow's launch. 25 to 29 degrees. Cancel your Florida vacation. Problem, Roger?
It could well be, yeah.
Okay. We got to get back to the Cape on this, so you want to gather anything, I'll go get Bob, and we'll hash it out in my office.
Morton Thiokol had won the contract to build the solid rocket boosters with a highly competitive bid. Roger Beaujolais and Arnie Thompson were their leading experts on a key component in the SRB. Their concerns related to its design. The booster was made up of cylindrical sections. The joints between the sections were sealed by 2 circular rubber rings, called the primary and secondary O-rings, each a centimeter thick and 12 meters long. But right from the first launch, it had been found that the SRB was flexing in an unexpected way, and the O-rings were having to perform a function for which they were not designed. Milliseconds after ignition, the walls of the SRB bow outward, opening a gap between the O-rings and the outer wall. To maintain the seal, the primary and secondary rings have to expand fast enough to close the gap. They must do this in less than a 50th of a second, or hot gases can escape. Known as blow-by, this caused dangerous erosion of the O-rings. But NASA management had so far defined the problems as acceptable risk and continued flying.
In January '85, I personally inspected the damage on the booster joints, and they're by far the worst we've ever had. That was also the coldest launch to date, 53 degrees, and I don't think that's coincidental. Now we're hearing from Kennedy that they're proposing to launch at 26, 30 degrees. Well, that's 25 degrees lower than we've ever launched at, and I'm worried.
I have to agree.
We've done tests at 100 degrees, 75 degrees, 50 degrees. And we know that at 50, it's much more sluggish than at 75. Do you know what happens to seal joints at ignitions that's next to freezing?
Well, that's the point. We're 25 degrees out of our experience base. We shouldn't fly.
Bob, the O-ring. It's eroding at the same time that it's trying to seal. And it's a race between will it erode more than the time allowed for it to seal. Well, we've won that race 24 times in the past. But at 25 degrees, it's never been tried.
I'm with you. You're talking about Thiokol pulling the shuttle for the first time ever. Well, we'd better ready up a hell of a presentation.
The telephone conference finally began at 8:15.
Essentially, our position is this. An engineering recommendation for caution. A recommendation not to launch.
Roger Beaujolais, Thiokol. Good evening. Basically, if erosion penetrates the primary O-ring seal, there is a higher probability of no secondary seal in the steady-state condition. Now, the cold will make the ring harder, and the harder it is, well, it's like trying to shove a brick into a crack instead of a sponge. Cutting to the chase, gentlemen, our concerns are these. The cold temperature may slow us down. Slow us down just enough so that we won't get a high probability of sealing. And the secondary seal may not be capable of being pressurized. And the result will be irreversible and catastrophic. And that's the bottom line of everything that we're presenting. Cold makes it too dangerous to launch. It's as simple as that. We shouldn't launch.
If our numbers are correct, and we feel good about them, then we'd be firing at 29 degrees. And that's 24 below our lowest experience base. Space Transport System 51C was fired at 53 degrees. And that's the lowest temperature we've seen. And substantially the worst blow-by of gas.
Telling us exactly what?
The time for the primary O-ring to come across the groove and be extruded into the seal gap would have to be increased. And if it is, then the action of the primary seal could be compromised. And the secondary seal may not be in position to seal the joint.
Larry Malloy, I got to tell you, fellas, your pitch just doesn't hang together. When you consider it all within the context of all data available, your conclusions just don't add up, Thiokol. Now, how can you tell me that damage to STS-51C was a result of cold, when your second worst case was at 75 degrees, room temperature? Do you see my point? I mean, O-ring damage has had a lot of causes. So what evidence do you have that damage to STS-51C was a result of cold? Can you quantify your concerns?
Well, I can't quantify them, no. I've got no data to quantify them. But I do know that we're moving away from goodness in our current database. Yes, there was blow-by at a room temperature launch, but not as much, not nearly as much as there was at 53 degrees.
We've been flying since STS-2 with a known condition in the joints that's been duly considered and accepted by Thiokol. It's been accepted by me. It's been accepted by all levels of NASA management through the flight readiness review process. This is a condition that we've had since STS-2 that has been accepted.
This is way out of our temperature experience. This is way, way colder than anything we've encountered. This is a good 25 degrees lower. And we are counseling caution as a consequence.
Is that the end of the presentation?
Yes. Yes, it is.
Okay, then I'd like to ask Mr. Kilminster for your recommendation.
Well, Larry, fire call position is this. A recommendation not to launch.
At this point, George Hardy, a strong-minded and powerful figure at NASA, was asked for his opinion.
Perhaps we could hear from George Hardy at Marshall. What do you think of all this?
I've listened to everything that's been said.
Frankly, I'm appalled by Thiokol's no-launch position. But I won't agree to launch against the contractor's recommendation.
Joe, any comments?
Ask him for a 5-minute caucus offline.
We'd like to propose at this point a 5-minute caucus offline so we can reevaluate the data.
Okay, we got a ground crew just starting to get ready to tank up. We need an answer as soon as possible.
Let's go get some coffee.
Look at the photographs. Look at the physical evidence. This is showing us the temperature is a discriminator.
We asked for 5 minutes. We've been getting comments for near on 20. Seems to me that everyone said what they think. Said it moreover several times. If anyone's got anything new to add, I think we ought to get it out on the table, but there's nothing to be gained by just rehashing. We spent a lot of time here looking at numbers and so forth and calculations. And we're going to have to take that information and do some management with it. It's time to make a management decision, because we're just spinning our wheels here otherwise. Intensity of argument's one thing. Data's another. I don't feel we have a strong enough case. And we can talk about intuition and hunches and the feeling that it's headed in the wrong direction, but our data is not conclusive. And I cannot disagree with Mr. Malloy. My position is we recommend launch.
What?
Cal, what do you think?
I think we're okay to launch.
My feeling is it's okay.
Bob, what do you think? Bob, it's time to take off your engineering hat and put on your management hat.
Well, I guess it's all right to launch.
Then I guess we're unanimous.
Good roll program confirmed. Challenger now heading down range. Engines beginning throttling down now at 94%. Normal throttles for most of the plane, 104%.
Go with throttle up.
Roger, go with throttle up.
Fido trajectory. Go ahead.
Flight GC, we've had negative contact, lost downlink.
Okay, all operators, watch your data carefully.
The Presidential Commission eventually determined that the cold had frozen the O-rings, allowing a fatal leak of gas. This, coupled with severe crosswinds, sealed the fate of the Challenger.
Horrible, terrible disaster and a tragedy, but not an accident. This was foreseen, talked about, ruled upon, and decided not to go, and then it was overruled by the very people who were supposed to place the astronauts in the safest position possible. It could never be called an accident.